Stuart Young has no moral authority, and the Sabga audio just proved it. An editorial by Professor Wall Street. Stuart Young wants the country to believe he is a statesman rising above the fray, penning grave meditations on the Constitution, while lesser mortals descend into partisanship. Read his latest statement closely, though, and a different man appears. A politician who sat on the National Security Council for a decade, from 2015 to 2025, who served 3 years as Minister of National Security, and who now, safely in opposition, has suddenly discovered that state power can be abused, that detention without charge is dangerous, that citizens deserve due process. Where was this Stuart Young for the 10 years he sat at the very heart of the nation security apparatus? He had already called for the resignation of the Attorney General and the Minister of Homeland Security before the Sabga audio ever reached the public. And now that it has, the tape does not vindicate him, it embarrasses him. He cannot summon a single word about the vile, derogatory manner in which Star Sabga spoke of Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar on that very recording. That silence is the whole man. Here are 10 reasons Stuart Young has no moral authority to lecture anyone, and why it is he who owes the apology. 1. He demanded resignations before he had the facts. Then the facts arrived and undercut him. Young had already called for the immediate removal of the Attorney General and the Minister of Homeland Security before the Sabga audio surfaced. On what proven basis did he make that demand? None that has withstood scrutiny. When the recording finally became public, it did not confirm his case. It exposed the ugly conduct of the very person his side has painted as a victim, a man of principle who jumps ahead of the evidence and then watches that evidence turn against him, withdraws the charge. Young instead pivots to attacking how the tape was leaked. That is not principle. That is opportunism scrambling for new footing. 2. He heard Star Sabga insult the Prime Minister and said nothing. The audio Young calls damning contains Star Sabga speaking of Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar in derogatory terms. A man of genuine moral authority would have condemned that first, plainly whatever his politics. Young does not mention it, not a line. He is scandalized by the leak and untroubled by its contents. When a man's outrage is triggered only by who is embarrassed and never by what was actually said, his outrage is partisan theater, not conscience. 3. He spent a decade at the center of the very machinery he now calls dictatorship. Young reminds us with evident pride that he sat on the National Security Council from 2015 to 2025 and served as Minister of National Security for 3 years. So the man now warning that the methodologies of dictatorship are present in Trinidad and Tobago is describing the machinery he sat at the heart of for a decade. If the tools are so dangerous today, they were dangerous when he had a hand on them too. He did not warn us then. He only discovered the danger the moment his side lost control of it. 4. His "I never requested an intercept" is a lawyer's dodge, not a defense. Young declares he never requested that anyone be placed on intercept. Note the careful wording. He does not say no intercept occurred under his watch, or that no one was surveilled, or that his governments never used emergency powers against opponents. He picks one narrow act he can deny and hopes you mistake it for a clean record. A senior counsel knows exactly what he is doing when he draws a line that precise. It is the language of a man building deniability, not disclosing truth. 5. He preaches due process now after a decade at the security table where it was tested. PDOs and the SOE are not replacements for the criminal justice system, he writes, and he is correct. But this sudden reverence for bail, habeas corpus, and the courts comes from a man who sat on the National Security Council for 10 years and ran the Ministry of National Security. Years in which states of emergency, detentions, and expanded police powers were deployed by the government he served. The principle is sound. Coming from him, at this moment, it is convenient. Principles you only remember in opposition were never principles at all. 6. He weaponizes the word innocent while ignoring the tape's actual content. Young asks how many innocent citizens are being detained, a fair question in the abstract, but he applies it selectively. He extends the presumption of innocence generously to those on the audio while extending nothing but suspicion to the government, whom he convicts of targeted political persecution without the very evidence he demands of them. He wants the benefit of the doubt for his side and none for the other. That is not a defense of due process. It is a double standard. 7. He accuses the government of abuse of office while demanding an abuse of the Prime Minister's office. His own headline reads, confirmation of abuse of office. Yet 2 days earlier, he had already called on the Prime Minister to summarily remove 2 sitting ministers, a demand he now stands behind even after the tape failed to support it. He wants Kamla Persad-Bissessar to bypass process and act on his say-so, the exact kind of arbitrary exercise of power he claims to be denouncing. He condemns the abuse of office while instructing the head of government to abuse hers on his behalf. 8. His tact on "I do not condone racism" gives the game away. The postscript, "I do not condone racism and would never do so," is telling. Why append it at all to a statement that never raised the subject? Because Young knows the Sabga audio touches on race and knows that condemning what was actually said would cut against the political point he is trying to score. So he inoculates himself with a one-line disclaimer while pointedly refusing to name or condemn the racism on the tape. A man who truly did not condone it would have led with it, not buried it in a PS. 9. He poses as democracy's defender while defending only his own side's interests. The Constitution and democracy are under siege, he thunders. But every specific grievance he lists runs in exactly one direction: his party's. He does not mention a single check that functioned, a single court that heard a matter, a single lawful process underway. Democracy, in Young's telling, is only ever under siege when his allies are inconvenienced. That is not a defense of institutions, it is a defense of a faction wearing the institutions as a costume. 10. He owes an apology, and he knows it. Young called for 2 ministers to resign or be removed before the public had heard a second of the Sabga tape. Now that tape is out, and rather than vindicating his demand, it reveals the ugly conduct of the person his side has cast as a victim, conduct he refused to condemn. His call for their heads was made on a foundation that has since collapsed beneath him. The honorable course is to withdraw the demand and apologize to the Attorney General and the Minister of Homeland Security. He will not, of course, but that is precisely the point. A man with moral authority corrects himself when the facts turn. Stuart Young simply changes the subject to who leaked the tape. In conclusion, so let us be clear about who is lecturing whom. A man who sat at the center of the nation's security apparatus for a decade, who now paints as sinister the very council he served on, who was content with emergency powers when his side wielded them, now stands in opposition discovering the Constitution as though for the first time. He demanded resignation before the evidence was in, stays mute on the racism captured on the tape once it surfaced, and shields himself with a one-line disclaimer he hasn't the courage to expand into an actual condemnation. That is not the conduct of a statesman. It is the conduct of a politician who mistakes his own ambition for the national interest. Stuart Young has no moral authority to demand anyone's resignation. What he has is a debt, an apology owed to the Attorney General, to the Minister of Homeland Security, and to a Prime Minister he could not even bring himself to defend against a slur he heard with his own ears. Pay it, Mr. Young. Then we can talk about who is really putting democracy under siege. Stuart Young is echoing the words of PNM Chairman Marvelous Marvin Gonzalez. Every PNM is a propagandist of the PNM